Okay, I think we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here today. I know it's the beginning of the day for some of you, the end of the day for others. Everyone's busy, so we really appreciate that you're here. My name is Tanaz Sassouni. I am on the Shotgun Street team. I'm sort of the Toolkit specialist street engineer on the street team, so you might have seen my name along with my colleagues, Phil Scatting and other members of the street team on a lot of tickets. I've been here for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. I was at DreamWorks Animation and R&H before that as a pipeline TD. And that's me. Oh, and I'm in LA. I'm coming from LA today. And just to give you guys a little idea of why we're here and what we're doing here, you know, back at SIGGRAPH this year, I had a chat with Manne Öhrström, who's also on the screen right now, who's our tech lead, and Josh Tomlinson, who's one of our senior engineers, about our Toolkit community. We think it's a pretty unique community. You guys are so awesome and so collaborative and so passionate about the products and all the cool things you can do with it. And we historically have had a really amazing relationship between our community and the Toolkit team, the people who are building the thing. Which has been awesome. We love talking to you guys about pipelines. We want you guys to succeed. We like to hear what you guys are doing. We love to hear your feedback because that just makes the product better, which in turn makes your experience better. And I came to learn that before I joined the team, we used to do webinars on a regular basis, and it sort of fell off in recent times. And it was a nice time for us to have some FaceTime with you guys. So we decided to get that going again. Today is hopefully the first of a series of those that we'll be having. The plan is to have one about every 2 months. The next one is scheduled for a little less than 2 months from now, end of December, just because we kicked off a little late. But we think it'll be really good, really fun, really informative for everyone. As far as today's topic, what we wanted to talk about, we kind of wanted to kick off with like an overview of where we are now, the state of the toolkit, and like the biggest change that has come to Toolkit in recent times is out-of-the-box integrations. The idea there, we think it's really cool. We know that like getting started with a pipeline configuration for Toolkit can be quite daunting, especially if you want to do something simple, if you don't have a lot of technical resources in your studio. So this is an opportunity. It gives you a way to get started with Toolkit without touching a single YAML file and have a very, like the very basics of a pipeline just off the bat. What's been cool about that is in developing these out-of-the-box integrations, we've sort of made some discoveries and added some features and had to rethink some things in ways that actually help everyone who's using Toolkit, not just the people who are using these out-of-the-box integrations on the simple side, but people who have been using the full pipeline configurations for many years as well. You guys have things to gain here as well. So we'll talk through all of that today. The format for the webinar today is kind of like a Q&A panel. Answering the questions, the A in the Q&A will be Manne Öhrström, who's our tech lead and kind of the OG originator of Toolkit and Tank and all of those things. I can give you some of the history. Rob Blau, who's our product manager, who sort of ushered it to where it is today. And the Q side of the Q&A is someone who's actually pretty new, a veteran at Autodesk, but new to the Toolkit team, who is Barb Balance, who is our director of engineering. So that's it. I think I can hand it off to you guys and you can jump in and get started.
Okay, Manny, do you want to just do a little bit more of intro bio about yourself?
Sure. Yep. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Manne. Very excited to be here today. It's good to do a webinar again. And as you can see outside, I'm not in California. The sun is not shining where I am. I'm based in London in the UK. And I've been doing this for kind of the idea of democratizing pipeline and Toolkit for quite a few years now. And it's mainly been based in London. Started out with a bunch of games, tools and pipeline development for games back a few years ago, quite a few years ago now. And then I've been doing a bunch of VFX and animation pipeline in London. And I met the Shotgun guys back in 2008 now, working at Framestore on a big pipeline project. And I kind of just found this amazing group of people, and I decided to try to join their course in building stuff that the entire community can take advantage of. So yeah, that's me.
Great. And Rob, do you want to also do a quick intro?
Sure. Looking through the names in the list, a bunch of you guys I already know, and there's a bunch of new names too, which is awesome. So hi, I'm Rob. I'm in Portland, Oregon. Also not sunny, but for a different reason. So my background, I started off at DreamWorks working a lot on Render Farm and ended up managing some of the global pipeline group there. And after that, switched over to Leica here in Portland. So putting together a pipeline for stop motion animation, which is incredibly intriguing and shares a lot of interesting problems with general VFX pipeline, but also live action and dealing with puppets. And then a little over 5 years ago, got to talking with Don and the Shotgun folks and Manny, and saw the efforts that was going on in terms of trying to put together a system for building pipelines, not just for one studio, but for the world. And I thought that that was a incredibly intriguing challenge, and joined the team, and have become kind of the product side of it. So I'm the guy who's trying to make sure I'm talking to you folks and understanding what you want the product to be and how you're using it, and that we're getting that work done.
Great. Okay, so just as an FYI for everybody, the way we decided to do the Q&A is for each question, I'm going to have Rob answer just from a product and motivational perspective of why we did it, and you know what it does for the product, and then Manny will dig into some of the more technical details. But first, I'll just, for people who aren't familiar with the concept of out-of-the-box integration, I thought it would be useful, Rob and Manny, just for you guys to give your perspective on what do you mean when you say out-of-the-box integrations.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just quickly want to add, everybody feel free to dump questions into the question window as we're talking about the topic that we're going through, or just general questions that you have. We'll kind of go through them as kind of it fits in with the general Q&A that we've got going on. So out-of-the-box integrations. So traditionally, Toolkit, when it came into being, was a framework for accelerating pipeline development. And really, it was targeting TDs at studios. We had default config that put together the pieces as kind of an example of how you could assemble stuff. But the intent wasn't that you could use everything as it was, unless, like, you know, our default directory structure and the way that we happened to write or publish and loading hooks exactly matched what you wanted. There was a lot you had to do in order to get Toolkit up and running. And the barrier to entry was pretty high. And Toolkit kind of was in beta for a long time. It was this like add-on, really advanced functionality that if you had Shotgun, some studios were adopting. And we saw a lot of pretty good success at a bunch of sizable studios. There's, you know, Toolkit in use around the world. Tons of artists and TDs are using Toolkit, but in order to get Toolkit up and running, some TD at a studio, multiple TDs, would have to dive in pretty deep and spend a lot of time understanding the system, getting it up and running. And there was that heavy upfront investment in order to get the payoff eventually in terms of accelerated development. And the key value proposition always was, you know, make one TD feel like 10 TDs. Like, you know, try to turn a TD into, you know, supercharged by giving them the tools to quickly put together workflows within Toolkit, which is awesome, and all that stuff is still there. But that initial barrier to entry just never felt good to us. We didn't want to force people to dive into the deep end of Toolkit in order to get value from it. We wanted to make it feel like it's just part of Shotgun. You sign up for Shotgun and look, here's these integrations that are up and running. And oh, by the way, they're also built on top of this awesome platform that lets you really reach in, take control, and make those integrations do what you want, or use the platform to build your own tools and functionality on top of it. And you can do so a lot easier than you would without it. And that's the idea that led to the out-of-the-box behavior of Toolkit. So what we released with that was implementation on top of Toolkit that just runs with Shotgun. All you have to do is download desktop, and then you will go ahead and be able to use a subset of the functionality of what we used to provide in the default config. And in order to do that, we had to take pieces of the configuration that were mandatory. Everybody would need to, like saying, hey, here's where Maya is, and create the software entity in Shotgun in order to manage that. The way that the publisher worked was really tied to templates and schema, and we couldn't include the directory structure aspects of Toolkit with this like zero configuration way of working. So we moved forward with plans we had for a standalone publisher, and we made sure that this next generation of publisher could run without configuration and just work out of the box. And that's kind of, we took all of the steps needed so that now with Shotgun, if you're just getting started and you haven't used Toolkit, you download desktop, and each project has an implied configuration. That configuration has the panel, the loader, the publisher, manage frame range through Shotgun. And it's enough to use Toolkit in order to bring Shotgun into the DCCs that we support and provide a basic workflow around sharing files, if not necessarily being able to control where people are outputting files in a managed directory structure. But at the very least, you can track files and have artists share those tracked files completely out of the box. So we've gotten a lot of the functionality that was available with Toolkit moved over to a place where it's accessible to everybody. And all that is still completely based on the very open architecture that we've always been committed to, so that people could reach in and take control of all that stuff if they wanted to dive into the deeper end of Toolkit as a platform. And that was the out-of-the-box integrations.
Cool. So yeah, that was a lot of info. Manny, I don't know if he stole your thunder, but do you want to just quickly say like what out-of-the-box integrations means to you on the technical side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is, as you can tell, a topic that both Rob and I are excited to talk about. And I mean, I think from the technical standpoint, this was also a great opportunity to go in and say, hey, we can go in and improve and extend a bunch of areas. Things that we had been talking about for a long time sort of came together with this effort, which was great. So I think it all kind of started with this idea that, previously you had to have a shared storage where you go in, you have a pipeline TD typically who would set up a project. And then once it's set up, you download all the different apps and engines, you go through the setup project, you then sort of go through and you manage the updates of apps and stuff of the core API. It's a pretty curated and manual process. So how do we do this with out-of-the-box integrations where every person starting desktop is kind of like just, needs to grab all the necessary updates and all the pieces that they need to run Toolkit? So we built what we call the Bootstrap API, which is a way to kind of just basically really easily launch Toolkit under the hood. And this, of course, is open. You guys can use it. So this means that you, with a few lines of code, can just start up all of the Toolkit, and behind the scenes, it essentially just runs that setup process on the fly for you. And this has turned out to be a very powerful building block that we've started to sort of continue to extend. And the whole out-of-the-box experience means you don't go into the configuration, you don't change any of the templates, the file system setup and stuff had to kind of be moved out so that we don't rely on that when we use the out-of-the-box integrations. So we had to figure out a bunch of stuff around that as well. So instead of this configuration, we looked at the apps, we looked at the publisher, like Rob was saying, that was really dependent on these templates, and we're like, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to build a new publishing system that, you know, well, we can build something much more flexible and plugin based. So we kind of got into that. So the out-of-the-box integration contains both an improved loader application and an improved publisher. And in the case of the loader, what people used to configure in the loader in the configuration would be these tabs on the side to say, you know, here's the list of assets, here's the list of shots, all that stuff is configurable. We added supports that's actually driven by the navigation hierarchy that you define inside of Shotgun, and that automatically is reflected inside of the loader. So that's a way that everything would tie together without any configuration. Yeah, I think that's basically it. And all this technology is something that, you know, we integrated with the Toolkit platform, so that, you know, the zero configurations, the out-of-the-box integrations is just one way to utilize all of this technology. Of course, that can be used in many other ways in custom workflows and in all sorts of scenarios.
Yeah, so I think, so by the way, I notice a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and for sure we're going to leave time at the end to get to those, but there's just a few like introductory like sort of philosophical questions and just release timing questions about what's come out that we'll go through first. So, you know, a lot of what we heard in your answers, you know, was about addressing the learning curve, making this easier for people who aren't so technical to use. Could each of you speak a bit about how this also helps non-technical, or sorry, the more technical users who have always liked using Toolkit?
Sure. So like I was talking about, in order to achieve that, like eliminating the barrier to entry, that was the target, not just lowering it. We did have to introduce a bunch of technology. Let me see about sharing my screen, at least to get a visual up. Sorry, I just have to do some go-to meeting shenanigans. All right, I believe I've got my screen up. So in terms of things that are available to everybody that just makes Toolkit in general more powerful, we've got the software entity in Shotgun now, and this allows you to just offload the configuration of where to find what DCC from the config files over to Shotgun. So there's auto discovery that's implemented as part of the engine now in terms of finding what Mayas you have installed or what nukes you have installed. And as long as they're in a standard place, then you can go ahead and leave all of this information blank, and the engine itself will find them. And all of that is just kind of tied in. So even without any configuration, you go ahead and find all instances of the DCCs that you have installed. I have a lot installed for testing. And if you want to, you know, arbitrarily group them together, make certain versions of the DCC available to certain users, restricts which versions, or whether you see, you know, do you need the Apprentice or Core or Nuke X, all of that stuff is doable just via simple management in Shotgun, rather than having to go and edit YAML files and figure out all that syntax. And then one of the big things is over in the pipeline configurations, you know, we've always had the very simple path where you drop your config on some shared storage, and you configure where to find it in Shotgun, and boom, everybody knows how to find those files, and there you go. But for the out-of-the-box integrations, we couldn't assume that there was shared storage for anybody. So we needed a way of taking all of the stuff that we normally rely on some NFS share somewhere to store and get it local on everyone's machine. And we really fleshed out what we call the descriptor API. It's in all the config files, the location portion of configuring an engine or an app is the generalized term for that is descriptor. And we have a bunch of different descriptor types that you can find something by a path on disk, or from its place in our app store, or its place in Git. And we enabled pipeline configurations to be found via that descriptor. So if you want, and this is the way that all of the out-of-the-box stuff works, you can put in a descriptor over here, and that will control the version of the config that would be downloaded, all of the code needed to run that config, and all that would be cached locally for somebody, which is what happens when desktop, or when you see desktop updating the config that it's going to run. We're working off of this descriptor. And that means that if you want to go ahead and manage your configurations, not via just editing the files on an NFS share, but take advantage of Shotgun as kind of like a cloud distribution mechanism for pipeline configuration, that's there. And given the different descriptor types, like you could actually create a field on a pipeline configuration in Shotgun, upload a zip of your config to it, set the descriptor to point to that field, and then roll out updated configs to everybody who's using Toolkit just by uploading a new zip. And then the distribution mechanism that we put in place for the out-of-the-box integrations would take care of making sure everybody is running that, which is great if you've got people that are distributed and not everybody shares the same storage, or if you've got freelancers or you're a contractor that's like maintaining a config for a studio or multiple studios. It's a very powerful tool for managing that. And then there's the new publisher. So in terms of what it looks like, in case people haven't seen it, it's just slightly updated. And the hooks that back the new publisher are designed to be more flexible than what was available in the previous publisher. There's a lot more of scanning your scene and generating a whole bunch of items that different tasks that know how to publish things can say, I know how to handle that item, and I'm going to go ahead and unpublish against it, rather than kind of this hard-coded hierarchy of like primary and secondary publishes that was implicit in the old publisher. And there's the ability to kind of publish to a different context, the ability to just drag and drop arbitrary files in here, publish in place, and see all of the logs and have a rich set of actions associated with everything that one of these tasks would do. So this new publisher is something that we've devoted a bunch of time to. We plan on continuously improving it, and it's kind of more the focus in terms of being able to put in place a more flexible system for publishing things. And yeah, those are kind of the big things that we're hoping everybody is taking advantage of, not just the people who are running Toolkit out of the box.
And one of the big things with a publisher as well is that you can actually not just publish Maya stuff, but you can drag in external files from somewhere and publish them alongside. So you can create a whole bundle of things you can publish at the same time and sort of batch it up. Don't know if you can show that, Rob, just the drag and drop stuff.
Yeah.
And that also meant that the publisher suddenly became very useful outside of Maya, outside of places where you had a current scene. And you could, so we decided to put it into Shotgun Desktop as well, where you can actually just drag and drop files into the publisher and publish them straight away. So if you want to publish a Maya file, you don't need to necessarily open Maya for that. And the way we try to design this is we try to decouple the functionality of discovery, what we call the collection, from how the logic of the different actions. So you can see there's a publish in Shotgun that appears in multiple places. So that publish in Shotgun, that works the same way, whether it's a JPEG file or a Maya session. which means that you can discover, say, your cameras in Maya or other file types, and some of the existing plugins. We try to make those work so that you can benefit from the functionality. The split allows us to reuse a whole bunch of stuff, and as you build customizations, you can also take advantage of that.
Great. So for the next question, I just wanted you each to sort of walk us through what came out in June versus where we're at now in terms of functionality.
Sure. So since June, we've been kind of just in polish and bug fix mode. We're close to the big release that will take a big step forward from that. But the out of the box integrations was probably one of the biggest toolkit releases that we've ever done. There was a lot that changed with it. Getting that fundamentalist shift to how people can use toolkit in place required changes to almost every single piece that makes up toolkit. So since then, we've been kind of listening, making sure that we stabilize everything that's happened given a release of that magnitude. Like the initial week or two, there was a lot of little patches and things that we were rolling out, and we wanted to just make sure that we provided a nice kind of stable point for everybody. And we've seen that there's been kind of certain roadblocks that people have hit in terms of using the new functionality with more of the classic way of using Toolkit, like having your configuration and updating that configuration to use the new publisher, or updating the configuration to use the software entity. So we've been kind of trying to do documentation, hold people's hands through that transition, and that's kind of been the most of it.
Okay, and Manny, do you want to comment on the technical side?
Not really. I mean, the big release happened back in June, as you guys said. And what we did practically is we created a brand new configuration called the TK config basic, and this is essentially what drives the out of the box integration. So the zero config integrations that we tend to call them, and we are just pushing updates to that configuration kind of as we go, as there are bug fixes and stuff, and they are automatically picked up. And it's all kind of auto-updating at this point. We've looked at a bunch of cases around offline workflows where you don't necessarily have an internet connection, etc. We're trying to improve the situation there. And around the fact that we now have automatic download of things going on. So when there's an update, you also you begin to download the different apps that are needed, required by that update, making sure that works and that seamlessly kind of there's good graceful fallback in the case that you don't have an internet connection, for example.
Great. Okay, and before we go to a general Q&A, I just wanted to give each of you a chance to talk about what's next. So I think there's two aspects of that. One is what your vision is, and the other one is, as Rob alluded to, most likely next week, but we're not exactly sure of the date. We're having quite a major update to out-of-the-box integrations, adding a whole bunch more functionality. So let's cover both of those topics before we go to the Q&A.
Sure. I'll start with the super short term and then dive more into kind of what comes next. So the next release that we have going out the door tries to really address the transition that people would have going from the out of the box and the way that everything behaves there, with the publisher acting as kind of the standalone publisher and being able to use the software entity and using the new publisher and all of that, versus the way that the default configuration that we have was structured. So there's kind of the default configuration, which uses the old publisher, doesn't use the software entity, and the way that the publish hooks work is different than the way that the publishing works in the out-of-the-box mold. So what we've done is gotten a new default configuration, default 2, DEFCON 2, in place that helps actually transition over and bring all this new functionality into a more classic toolkit setup. So the new configuration uses the new publisher. We've implemented all of the publish hooks and publish styles that were in the default configuration, updated to be compatible with the new publisher. So all of the things that we were used to publishing now are there. Like in Nuke, a shotgun write node will now be discovered and be published to where the template says that it should be published, just like it would in the old publisher. But it also preserves all of the behavior that you would get out of the box. So if you're using all of just the integrations without having a configuration, and then you decided to plunge into the deeper side of the pool and create a configuration, you would end up with everything you were used to, plus all the stuff that we had in the default configuration in terms of the default directory structure, the write nodes, the Lembic and Mantra nodes and Houdini and stuff that needs the directory structure in order to function. And the new configuration has a updated organization to it, like how we've structured the files and the includes, so that it's kind of easier to maintain. We've learned a bunch of lessons since we put together the default configuration that was fairly old, and there's a lot of newer capabilities in Toolkit, so we took the opportunity to update that. As part of this, there's been an update to the WebSocket protocol, the thing that lets the Shotgun website talk to desktop and launch things from Shotgun and allow you to populate the Shotgun menus from your configuration. So with this release, we're turning on that update to the protocol by default. One of the things that the new protocol allows is, before, everything in Shotgun, all your menu items would be generated. If you were looking at a shot in Shotgun, it would be shotgun_shot.yaml. That would be the environment that would generate the items in that menu. If you're looking at a task, it would be shotgun_task, and it was just this magic hard coding, a one-to-one relationship between the entity type you were looking at the menu on and the config. We've rerouted that so that it goes through the pick environment hook. So now you can use any of the information that's available in the pick environment hook to generate the list of actions that would show up for the menu on something that you're looking at in Shotgun, which enables you to have department-specific commands showing up in those menus, or user-specific. It makes it a hook, which is a lot more generalizable. And in addition, we've done an update to the publisher. So what I'm kind of showing over here is you get a kind of description of what's going to happen when you click on publish to Shotgun or upload for review. But we've added in a hook that lets you do custom UI for a given publish type, which we're pretty excited about. So now not only do you just have completely static publishes that you can expose to artists, but you can give them a handcrafted UI in order to update settings on that publish, which we think will make it a lot more universal. We're excited to see what people do with that. And then a bunch of optimizations and other kind of bug fixes that are there, and it'll be in the release notes when it goes out. But that's the main idea. Make it so that there's a very smooth transition available to people who want to go from or see things in the out-of-the-box integrations that they want in a configuration, and getting that configuration in place, some optimizations, and the update to the publisher.
Okay, Manny, did you want to comment on that also?
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of this has been, it's quite a lot of work in many areas. Of course, there's all of the existing configurations, everything in Toolkit still works. We've created a new configuration that ties things together in a new, improved way. Everything that all existing projects and setups will still work. I wanted to talk about the publisher with the custom widgets. That's pretty exciting, I think. And just to elaborate a little bit there, that you have complete control over the widgets in that kind of part of the UI, so you can really orchestrate exactly what you need in terms of parameters, widget stuff. It's very, very kind of open. So we're excited to see what you guys will make of that. I think the structure of this new default configuration is very different. And like Rob said, we've learned a lot building the zero configuration, the basic configuration that we released back in June. We've been trying to take and learn some of those lessons. So everything should be easier to update and much clearer. It's a big change from the existing default configuration that maybe some of you are familiar with. That still exists in the desktop setup. So you can go and you choose the legacy option. You get everything just the way it is today after this release. But the new one hopefully should be like a big improvement in terms of clarity and structure and organization. We also started to move a bunch of the hooks that we used to have in apps and in config into the engines themselves. So actually the Maya related hooks, they live inside of the Maya engine now, which makes a lot of sense because when you're building a new engine, then you can just put the hooks that you need for that engine in the engine rather than having to update all of the apps, which we on a regular basis have to go through and do these big updates. So that feels like a better home for those things. And with the publisher, I think as well, we've tried to evolve that and really think about how can we build the integrations, the plugins that drive the publishing process so that they work well both with and without templates, trying to, what Rob was talking about, kind of bridge that gap between, I want to have control, I want to have a naming convention versus I want to publish, any content that I want without having to pre-configure everything in advance.
And then Barb, you also said kind of what's slightly longer term, and just in terms of that, there's a constant effort to make sure that the bugs and features that you guys are asking for are prioritized and that we're taking care of them. We sit down weekly with Naz and the street team in order to go over kind of the tickets that are coming in and the requests that people have in order to help with all of that prioritization. So keep them coming. Make sure that they know what you guys want and the bugs and issues that you guys are seeing. If we don't hear about it, we can't fix it. So please, God, put tickets in around it. And other than that, like one thing that we're looking at is kind of how Toolkit and render farms and general rendering on a local farm, rendering on the cloud should work, and making the process of getting that kind of computation running in a way that is the same kind of thing that we do for Toolkit in general, where something works out of the box, and if you are a TD, you can work a lot faster within a framework that understands that kind of submission. And then using Shotgun kind of as a reporting tool in order to understand who's been using what where for that kind of computation is the kind of thing that we're kind of diving into and starting to spec out.
And on the technical side, there's one feature that's particularly close to my heart, which is something we talked about for a long time, and we're finally at the place where I think we're ready to tackle it, is what we call cloud configs or zip configs. So Rob showed you the descriptor field on the pipeline configuration, which lets you basically say, hey, my pipeline configuration isn't on disk in this like Mac, Windows, Linux path anymore. Actually, it's in Git and it's version 1.2.3. And then, which is a very powerful way of deploying remotely. And the next step is to make that even simpler for people who don't store their configurations in Git and be able to just zip up your configuration and upload it directly to Shotgun and have that then being picked up as the default. So that's something that we think is going to be a very powerful way to quickly distribute and configure setups, whether they are local on your network if you're in the same building or if you have remote collaborators.
Okay, so there's a bunch of questions here, so I want to make sure we do justice to them.
I can sort of I've been sort of packaging these as they've been coming in. So I'll start with 3 for you guys that have to do with software entities that I think can kind of be the same conversation. The first one is from Peter Nip, and he says, is it theoretically possible to use the software entities without an explicit declaration of an engine? I mean, to basically integrate tools with no engine available at the moment. So that's one. Then the next is from Ali Jafaroli, and he's saying, could you specify which software, which version of a software to use per pipeline step? And related to that one, from Scott Ballard, is all of the functionality in the YAML files replicated in the software entity?
I can tackle those. Manny, fill in the gaps that I'm sure I'll leave. Okay, so in terms of, let me make sure I get all of those. Use the software entity without the explicit declaration of an engine. Yes, so you can create a software entity, leave the engine declaration blank. It means that there's not going to be any kind of automatic discovery of that, but if you just fill in the path fields, then it'll show up. It's as if you kind of just are saying, hey, I want to launch Notepad, or some random thing that we don't have integration for. You can completely use the software entity to do that. And then if you want to specify the version, version was next. If you want to say which version to use on each step, currently there isn't a step restriction on the software entity, but if you are running a config, the newer protocol that's about to become the default, it's available right now via an environment variable, does have the ability, because it's going through the pick environment hook, you can use the step in order to populate that menu via a different environment. And then there's actually a second hook that's available on the protocol that's populating all of those menus that runs after all of the items have been generated, that lets you filter them down, or even, I guess, add just canned things that you want to add to that. And you could conceivably filter it down in that hook as well. So you'd have to have a configuration and kind of take over those hooks in order to implement that functionality, but it's doable. And then Scott was asking, is all of the functionality in the YAML files replicated in the software entity? Almost. I'm trying to think.
There's something that we didn't, doesn't completely translate right. I'm trying to remember what that is.
There's the ability to kind of provide a alias for a launcher. So like going back to the example of launching Notepad, there's no engine for Notepad, but let's say that you still wanted to do your directory creation. In the configuration, there's a way of saying, hey, I'm going to launch Notepad. It doesn't have an engine, but it's going to be considered the TK Notepad for the purpose of knowing which folders to create and which folders not to create. Because in the schema, you can say only create these folders when I'm launching this engine. So that particular functionality isn't there. I'm having a hard time thinking of anything else, but we tried to capture almost everything in the software entity. Did I miss anything, Manny? Is there anything else?
No, I think that summarizes it very well. Yeah, I'm trying to think about. I mean, we try to. It's kind of a superset of what you can do in the old Launch app. You have more options to group and to organize things. So that's another way you can use the software entity, is to actually say, hey, all the MyAs should be grouped together, and we introduced in the register command a new token that lets, if the engine understands how this grouping the desire to group, how to implement that. Like in Shotgun Desktop, for example, you see a drop down where you have Maya 2016, 2017, 2018, etc. And you can group using these special fields as well in arbitrary ways to kind of, you have pretty good control over how you want these things to appear in Shotgun Desktop and in other places.
Yep.
Okay, the next package is about the Standalone Publisher and publishing in general. One of the questions is from Michael Miller. Will it be possible to rename and relocate files through the Standalone Publisher using templates? And the second one is from Dwayne Seward. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Publishing seems to be a very powerful for pipeline automation. Are there advanced examples that can be demonstrated?
Yeah, so with the next release, there's a completely updated set of hooks that's going to be part of that default 2 configuration that implements the union of the standard of what you can do via the publisher and how you can go ahead and use settings on a given publish type in order to have a template that you use to control where the outputs go and where a work file would be copied to for the registration shotgun, for how to track the publish and all of that kind of stuff. So bunch of examples about to be released. And yes, you can completely use a template in order to copy or control output as part of a publish action. Did I cover it?
Okay. Okay, these aren't packages anymore, but just some general integration questions. Any success stories or case studies for integrating assets from Shotgun into game engines, Unreal, Unity, proprietary, using Toolkit automation?
We've seen some really cool game engine integrations. I think if you ask on the dev list, it's kind of up to people who've implemented it to know if what they can and can't talk about. But we have seen both Unreal and Unity integration, both at the Python and C++ level. And there's some really neat stuff that people have done with that. We don't have any of that currently as part of the default toolkit setup, but if there's workflows that you're particularly interested in, I'm interested in hearing about them because it's something that we're kind of always trying to figure out what's the right way to implement that once we get around to doing that. We're also hoping that, given the development efforts that people have done, some studios have expressed openness to sharing the code. I don't know if it's actually panned out, but we are hoping that if we're not getting to it fast enough, that the community is able to put together something and that we can help out with that if needed.
Great. Another integration question. Can you talk about the integration with render management software like Deadline?
So things like RenderMan, Arnold, Deadline, Q, Royal Render, whatever the system is stuff that we're starting to think about. We can't really go into very much detail super early in all of that, but it's something that we're very interested in talking to people about, understanding kind of how you manage the computation that happens in your studio, what it's structured, what it looks like, how you're tracking it, what tools you're using, if there's a way of submitting those jobs that you've put in place to incorporate it into your pipeline in a standard way, or if you're using whatever those tools have provided out of the box. That's the kind of learning that we're doing right now. And anybody who's willing to talk about it, please let's get in touch. We might kind of be sending out some questionnaires or surveys in order to start the conversation with people in the near future also.
And as for the current functionality that Toolkit provides, its rendering is kind of a, that's something that happens. It's kind of a black box. You render in Maya, files come out, and then you can publish those files in Toolkit, but there's no particular connection right now between the rendering process and Toolkit.
Information or how-tos regarding using descriptors for pipeline configurations would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think we've got the general descriptor API up, but just putting together a quick little how-to around using a descriptor and a shotgun field should be pretty easy. I think we can queue that up.
Okay. Great. What else do we have here? Let's see. Any offline publishing functionality in Wix?
Not right now. And my understanding when somebody says offline publishing is that if you've got your laptop on your airplane and you did some work and you want to publish it, that you can go ahead and like queue that up, and then when you plug in and Shotgun is accessible to you again, then you would go through that queue of publishes that are waiting and get them actually shared out. Yeah, that's not something that we currently have planned out around the timeline. If it's something that's kind of a high priority for you, again, kind of go through support and street team. We kind of rely a lot on Tanaz and Phil and the rest of the street in order to make sure that the stuff that people are saying is important makes its way to us.
And related to that, we also have like feature request forums where you can upvote features. So if there's something there that is exciting to you, we do look at those numbers. So, or put it there, and maybe other people will find it exciting and it'll come in front of us that way. Okay, these two are kind of related. One is from our own David Mason. Will there be a way to have templates with the out-of-the-box config, and will this ever be done in the web UI, like how software entities are? And then sort of the same question-ish from Michael Miller. The new publisher and out-of-the-box integrations look great, but I can't trust my artists to name files and place them in the right place. We need to maintain control over the file system, naming conventions, directory structure. What is the plan for getting support for templates and configurations in the out-of-the-box integrations?
Really good questions. And there's a design that Manny and I have cooking around these two questions that we're pretty excited about. We have no idea yet when we'll be able to deliver it, but we do want to provide a middle ground for people right now, like in terms of kind of the depth of the pool that you're diving into when you're using Toolkit. There's the out-of-the-box stuff, which is the shallow end, and then you've got your configuration, and there's kind of a cliff in between the two. So we are working on a design that would allow you to put in your own hooks, turn off the hooks that are there in the out-of-the-box integrations, and even potentially merge in little snippets of configuration. And by doing so, we're hoping to land at a workflow where if you don't want to take complete control of the configuration and just want to add a specific publish type or turn off something that's there, that you can go ahead and drop a Python file in a known directory that's in an environment variable, that's a path style environment variable, and that those kinds of hooks would be able to be picked up. And then templates and that would be YAML files, and slowly enhancing that ability to merge in a subset of a configuration to a running configuration. And that's something that's kind of in early design right now. If people are really interested in that, and again, I'd love to talk through in more detail with people in order to run through what we're thinking and see if it would work for you. So another of those things that if you want to dive deeper, let's get in touch.
And it's very much this idea that I think ultimately, if you reach the level of advanced Toolkit, you probably want to access all of the configuration. You want to configure templates and naming conventions, etc. But there is that entire transition path of saying, okay, I'm here now. Everything works out of the box. Now it's a big step to take. How can we gracefully, gradually kind of begin to evolve that configuration and start with a few changes, start with a few extensions, and then gracefully, as you begin to understand more the concepts and the functionality, things like hooks, then taking that last step of like going into the full config is going to be, well, so we think it's going to be easier for people.
Okay, this one might be actually studio related. We're in the process of rolling out the import media tool to generate versions. I noticed that the tool creates published files as well. What is the difference between that app and the Standalone Publisher?
So yes, the import media app is something that, here, I've got I knew that question would come to the front. On our support site, you can kind of see what we're talking about over here. It is just a part of the Shotgun Studio team. There's a series of apps that are designed for production and the clients that they hire to exchange information easily. And this is one of those apps. So if you're kind of interested in it, studio support at shotgunsoftware.com is the email address that you can use to kind of ask questions about it. But in general, if the import media app works for you, its whole purpose is to provide more of a kind of generic interface for media in specific, and doing batch imports of it with appropriate configuration, stereo support. Everything that it does is technically doable via the publish, just given how generic the new publisher is, but the UI and error reporting and everything that is available in the import media app is more finely tuned to that particular task. So publishing is just so general, and given the hooks in the publisher, it's really a Swiss Army knife. You can do almost anything with it, but certain kinds of publishing is bespoke. You kind of want a more custom UI to do it. So the import media app is one of those examples, along with things like how you would use Nuke Studio to do an export of a timeline. Like, we use the UI inside of Nuke Studio in order to enable that kind of functionality, rather than trying to shoehorn it into the more generic interface of the publisher. Manny, anything else about kind of import media and the differences between it and the publisher?
No, I think, like you say, they are beginning to get close, but there are definitely workflows like where we've basically built, handcrafted a tailored app that is specifically targeting that workflow, whereas the publisher is much more of a generic thing where we're thinking, we know a lot of the stories around publishing, but we also expect people to bring in and configure and use this as a kind of a workbench to build their own workflows.
Oh, Tanaz, are you muted, or I can't hear you?
Sorry, I was muted. Apologies. We have about a minute to go. We have still some questions in the docket here, so if you guys want to contact us after and we can talk about those offline, that would probably be the best way, but I think we're done here, yes? Unless anything else from Barb, Manny, Rob?
We're excited about this whole series, and we're brainstorming topics for the next ones. So definitely, if you guys have things that you want to hear about, let us know. And we will try to make sure that we cover the stuff that you actually want to hear about.
And I'll do a quick plug also. If any of you are not on the Shotgun Dev Google group, that's sort of our community mailing list for our technical users of Shotgun. It's where we do announcements like this. So that's a great place to get a lot of good information about Toolkit. People are asking about release dates for config 2, new TK code, blah, blah, blah. We can't do a release date until they happen when they happen. We can't give you exact dates, but it's all coming very soon. I think we can say that with confidence.
Very soon.
All right, great. Thanks very much, everyone. See you at the next one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.